Welcome to the latest episode of the Dawn Jarvis Show. This is the podcast where I talk to leaders, professionals, and business owners about who they are, what they do, and why they do it, how they manage their own health and well-being, and how they stay focused, positive, and productive. It's brought to you by dawnjarvis.com. Today, my guest is Dr. Roberta J. Wilburn, and we're talking about the impact of racialized trauma on our health and well-being. Dr. Roberta Wilburn is an award-winning diversity and inclusion expert, best-selling author, and diversity trainer. She helps people get real, that's R.E.A.L, about diversity so that they can learn to excel in a diverse and inclusive world. Dr. Wilburn is an Interim Chief Diversity Officer at Whitworth University, as well as the President of Wilburn Associates, LLC, a diversity and consulting business. She is also known as the Culture Connoisseur because of her program, A Cup of Culture and a Taste of Diversity. Hello, Dr. Roberta. How are you? It's so good to see you. How are you?
Oh, yes, it's wonderful to talk to you across the pond, right?
Yeah. It's a lovely May day. It's evening time for me, but what time is it for you where you are?
Oh, it is 11 o'clock
Oh,
in
well,
the
there we go. So I'm
afternoon.
coming to the end of my day and you're just starting yours, aren't you? So
Yes.
Dr. Roberta and I know each other from a mastermind program that we were in together, and we've stayed friends ever since. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. And the first question I ask all my guests is, how did you get to be where you are today? What was your journey?
Oh, wow. That's a long story. So, how did I get to be where I am? Well, I've always wanted to teach.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily imagine me being in higher ed initially, but I just wanted to teach in the classroom. But then eventually I did move into higher education because I really, after some of the racial experiences and things that I had, I was really always concerned with marginalized groups. And so I started out actually working in special education because I found that there were children who were learning in different ways and needed different supports, and they weren't getting it. And I wanted to be able to help them because I believe that all children can learn if given the right methods and caring professionals to work with them. But as I moved on and moved into different university settings, then I really got more involved in diversity. I was the chair of the Department of Education in my Lemoyne College, which is a historically black college here in Memphis, Tennessee. And then I also was the director of international studies. So I combine those things because diversity has always been my passion and interest. And as I saw people being marginalized and even myself being marginalized, I wanted to do something to help. And so I just really continued to pursue that. And I was in teacher ed and in counselor ed, and then I decided I just really want to focus on diversity because that's really where a lot of the systemic problems exist. And if we don't eradicate those, then we're not going to be effective in our schools or anywhere else.
And it's great to talk about this subject with you and with your experience. And we're talking about the impact of racialized trauma on our health and well-being. And I know that you have got a lot to say on this. And there's different types of racial trauma, isn't there, Dr. Roberta?
Yes, there is. But I think first, I guess I need to define what racial trauma is because not
Okay.
everyone knows. And so I like the what Sheila Weiss Rose says, and she says that racial trauma can be defined as the physical and psychological systems that people of color often experience symptoms, I'm sorry, that people of color often experience after a stressful racist incident. These personal or vicarious, which means that it doesn't have to happen to you, but you can
Yeah.
just see someone else going through
Yeah.
it, and then that can be traumatizing to you. Incidents happen repeatedly. Okay, we see this all the time, and causing our racial trauma to be accumulated, which can contribute to, chronic stress and other kinds of negative impacts on our physical well-being.
Yeah.
And so that's what it is. But when you're talking about different types, there are just, there's quite a few, and a lot of people don't even really know what it is. But I talked about, vicarious trauma, and I'll just start there, just simply because of when the incident with George Floyd happened.
Yeah.
That was played on every single TV station here, there, and everywhere. I'm sure you saw plenty of it,
I did. I did.
over and over and over and over again. That's vicarious trauma. You
Yeah.
traumatized seeing that happen to
Yeah.
someone else. I mean, it
Yeah.
didn't happen to you, but you still could feel the hurt, the pain, all of the emotions related to that. And that's just one incident. And so when you're seeing multiple incidents, and depending on where you are, so if you're watching it on TV, that's one form of the vicarious trauma. But imagine you being in, just actually in that physical space. The young
Yeah.
lady who actually took the video,
Yeah.
imagine her impact, and the other youth and people. That's vicarious trauma. And so that can be very negative, as well as actual physical trauma. There can be physical trauma when you are, someone physically assaults you, or there can be emotional trauma when someone is saying things or calling you names. And what I experienced, my first experience with racial trauma was when I was in sixth grade.
Yeah.
And my dad grew up in the Navy, and he had been telling me about, his negative experiences that he had in the Navy. And I was just like, Dad, that was way back then. That's not happen anymore. You know how we do. We never think our parents know what they what they're talking
Yeah.
about. And so, growing up in New York, I ended up. I was right. I started being bused, but it wasn't just a typical, get on a school bus.
Yeah.
It was, I had to ride two city buses and a train to get to this white school on the other side of
Mm.
the city. And in doing so, every day when we got off the train, most of us kids, we would stop. There was a little newspaper stand, and we would get our candy and stuff like that. And this one particular day, this elderly white woman, she dropped her change on the ground. And just instinctively, I just bent over to pick it up to give it to her. And I was cursed out, called the N word, and everything except a
Oh,
child of God. And I'm thinking about this. I was in sixth grade,
that's awful.
you know, and then I still had to walk to school. I'm crying because I couldn't understand what happened. I was just trying to be
Yeah.
helpful. I I
Hmm.
I didn't do any. I didn't think I was doing anything bad to
Hmm.
have that attacked. And I don't know whatever the other kids. I think when that happened, I think everybody else just scattered and left. And
Yeah.
so then I had to kind of walk to school, tears, go to school, and then perform because we didn't have any school counselors. We didn't have. I didn't have anyone who I could. I mean, going to an all white school first of all. Who am I going to talk to? Who am I going to tell what happened?
Yeah.
And so that was my first real experience with racial trauma. And it's something that has stuck with me for all those years.
It's it's amazing that you that and thank you for sharing that story. And I guess it shows, as you said, that this happened when you were a lot younger, quite
Hmm.
innocent, didn't know what was happening. But the impact of that incident has stayed with you as a grown woman, has
Hmm.
enabled you to sort of like talk about the impact it may have on other people as well. And I was really struck by what you said around, because I remember the same with my dad, him telling me stories about injustices that he suffered at work, and me
Hmm.
thinking exactly the same thing that you said. Oh, that's not going to
Yeah,
happen in my time. It's all
right.
very different now. And that actually not being the case. And that's quite disappointing. And I also think that when you see and experience this, whether it's yourself or you see other people experiences, it's those memories that you draw back on, and it's sort of like a recurring pain, isn't it, really, that
Yes,
you're
it
always
is.
living with. And I think if you've
Hmm.
not had that lived experience, you don't have an understanding of what that's like. I read something on Twitter today about some young men who'd been stopped and searched. It was a very controversial thing that happens in the UK with the police service.
Hmm.
And there
It
were,
happens here too.
yeah, and there were some comments, and there was a video, and and the people involved, the young black men, were obviously very traumatized by what happened. And some white commentators were like, well, I don't understand, that was just seemed perfectly normal to me. The policemen were very polite, and I was screaming inside, I think, saying, you don't
Right,
get it. You really
right.
don't get it. I got it totally. I didn't even have to watch the video, and I didn't want to watch the video because I
Right.
knew what it was going to be like. And I think
Hmm.
I was thinking about the challenge of sort of like, how do you get that across to somebody who doesn't know what it's like to experience it.
I think part of it is sharing stories
Mhm.
and making it real. And one of the things that in my real framework, the first part is, the R, it has to do with relationships and building authentic engagement. And it's through our stories that we really can touch people's hearts.
Yeah,
And so that's another thing that I do. I talk about transforming hearts and minds for racial reconciliation. And in order to do that, you really have to build authentic relationships. It can't be superficial. Oh, I got a black friend.
yeah,
No. Well, I have my one black friend. Well, have you ever been to their home? Do you really know anything about this one black friend? No. And have you listened to any of the significant stories that have happened in their life? So, one of the things that I do in my current position at the university is I'm on the president's cabinet, the president of the university. And so I have on a monthly basis courageous conversations.
yeah,
And
I
in
like
these
that.
courageous conversations, we share stories about actual things and events. And we are getting to know each other on a different level, and also understanding that we're not monolithic community.
Yeah,
Everyone is different. Everyone has different, even though, I mean, there, are um, white people or Asian or Hispanic people, and you may have a stereotype of what their life and experience is, and it may be nothing like that. But the only way you're going to find out about it is by talking to them and listening to their stories. And then when you share things about, and it can be hard, and not everyone can do this, talking about your trauma experiences, that can be eye opening for people. And then they were like, oh my gosh, I never really realized it. And I think sometimes, all the stuff they see on the news, I'm like, how can you not realize it? But sometimes it's just not connecting as well as if someone they actually knows talks to them and shares about what those experiences are.
I really like that. I really like sharing through stories. That's a really good tip, and it works as well. I've seen that work. Now we're
Mhm.
talking about the impact of racial trauma on our health and well-being. Talk to me a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Because of all the things that, if you look statistically, you will find that African American people and other people of color, um, their health is significantly impacted by these ongoing stressful experiences. And a lot of it, and Corn talks about, well, she calls it allostatic load. And so, like, if you think about it, if you have, like, say, if I'm carrying one book is not heavy, but if I keep adding and adding and adding, then that, it weighs you down. And so that's what, 'cause some of the experiences are microaggressions, which are maybe smaller kinds of things, but when you have this every single day by different people, then it wears you down. And it can cause you, number one, to deal with depression. Um, Also, in dealing with depression, then there are triggers. So, you know, I'm trying to get over my situation, but then I see something that happens to you, or I read something in the paper, then that re-triggers the event. It brings it up again. Okay. And so it can cause you to withdraw.
Yeah.
You have that fight or freeze kind of syndrome. And so, that's why you have some people who are just like, I'm going to fight everybody. Any white person is wrong and bad, And so
Yeah.
that's a response. Or you have people who withdraw and don't want to do anything. Then it also impacts our blood pressure. It increases our blood pressure, heart rate, all of those kinds of physical symptoms. And because traditionally African American and other people of color, um, number one, have some apprehension about healthcare systems,
Yeah.
but then also they have even more stigma around mental health.
Yeah.
And so they don't want to get help or seek help. And I talked about, well, I couldn't get any didn't get school counseling or whatever. It wasn't even a thought back then. But still now, when you talk to particularly African American men, and this is a big problem with African American men because we know that they tend to be profiled more than
Mm-hmm.
others. And they
Hmm.
deal with a lot of depression. So what ends up happening is they self-medicate very often with alcohol and drugs. So then that we know is causing a problem. Then they don't want to go to counseling because they'll say, I'm not crazy,
Hmm.
because you have that stigma. So there's a lot of things that could be helpful that we have to break down the barriers of stigmas, particularly when you're talking about people of color who may not feel comfortable disclosing. Because think about it, our mental health system was created from a Eurocentric perspective. And are you going to find someone who really understands who you are? I know even myself, it took me, I've gone to counseling because counseling is very helpful and beneficial. It really is. And so I found that um, I had to go through a couple of counselors to find one that really was a good match for me, understood my needs and my values. And
Yeah.
so that's another thing that meant very often, and statistically, I used to teach um, a course on cultural considerations in counseling. And
Okay.
when I was teaching this class, one of the statistics was amazing. Like 50% of people of color terminate their counseling after the first session.
Really? That's an amazing
Yes.
statistic.
Yes. Isn't that
That's an
crazy?
amazing.
It's because they don't feel that connection, or the therapist may want to ask them to start disclosing all this thing on the first session. Like, I don't know you. Why do you think I'm going to share? Don't know how to build rapport appropriately across diversity. And so that's really what I do is I try to help people understand that that one size does not fit all,
Yeah. Yeah.
so you cannot treat everyone the same. And if you're having, and I talk about the dynamics of difference. That means when you get people from different cultural backgrounds who get in the same space together, there's difference, you know. Even you and I, we're, you're in the UK, I'm in the US.
Yeah.
There's a difference between our experiences. Some things are the same, but some things are different. And so we need to understand that dynamic of difference. And because there's a dynamic of difference, there's 100% chance that at some point in our relationship, I may say something that may offend you.
Well,
and
I
vice
wouldn't like to
versa,
think so, but yeah,
or vice
absolutely.
or vice versa. But
Yeah,
sometimes it's unknowingly. I say something because, oh, really? I didn't know. Tell me what I did. But
yeah,
other groups may be more defensive. What are you trying to say? I'm a racist, and then it just blows up and it makes it worse. And so, therefore, a lot of people of color, they suffer in silence because they don't feel like they can share what's going on. And in many cases, they feel like it must be just me.
yeah.
And it must be just me. And so suffer in silence. They don't get the help that they need. And then that contributes to um, other problems, health problems.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you say, particularly as a health professional. Although I'm not practicing and clinically at the minute, but there is a real thing, particularly around mental health. Um, Around how people access services and whether they feel understood, whether
Hmm.
they comply, for want of a better word, with a
Hmm.
treatment program, and how useful that is for them, and do they see people who look like them in the
Hmm.
health service so they can feel, and also are the services designed with their particular needs in mind. And so
Hmm.
that all contributes to what can be quite poor outcomes, and poor prognoses. And there's lots of research around, and in fact, I used to do a talk called "Racism Makes You Ill," around the compounding effect of structural racism, as well as sort of like personal racism, how that can
Hmm.
impact on people's health. And so all you say is very true, and it's documented and researched. And um, sometimes it can feel, what can we do? So I know that you're also going to talk about strategies how to help people cope with the thing that's
Hmm.
happening to them. So I think sometimes, or you talked about, people think that they might be on their own with this. So it's really helpful to know that this happens to a lot of people. It's happened to me, it's happened to
Hmm.
you, in various, it can happen in your employment, it can happen in your family, it can happen walking down the street, can't it, really?
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
these have a compounding effect. And it's good to know that you're not alone. But how do people then manage that? What strategies would you suggest to do that?
Well, number one, I think it's really important that you build a good support system,
Mhm.
a support system of caring people, people who you can talk to confidentially, um, people who understand where you're coming from, who are not going to be judgmental. Okay, so that's important, because sometimes you just need someone to say, "I've been there too," or you're right to feel the way, you have the right to feel the way you feel, because sometimes when these incidents occur, very often, if we're in a majority culture, they will say, "Oh, you're just making a big deal over nothing," and say they want to minimize the experience, and so then you begin to second guess yourself about what has happened to you. So you really need to have a support system. You also need It's really also important for you to limit the amount of time that you spend watching the news and on social media when it deals with um, racial issues that might be triggering to you or re-traumatizing to you. So that's another thing that's really, really important. And you can do things like go for a walk. Sometimes when you have had an experience, um, you just need to get out of that experience. Sometimes you just need to be by yourself to process or to regather yourself. Um, other things that you can do, which, well, this is part of my work, but I have um, now been really proactive in calling out people on their inappropriate behaviors or things that are harmful to people of color that they don't have a clue about. And so I think that it's really important not to um, allow those incidents to go by. Sometimes you can't confront it right then and there, and you always have to count the cost.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have to count the cost. Is it going to be a situation where you're going to be retaliated again? Then you've got to be careful with that.
Yeah.
Um, but there's always places that you can go to get support, and you
Yeah.
need to go to that, and whether it's a religious place or whatever, but you definitely need to do that. Um, you need to engage in self-care.
Yeah.
Think about yourself, and we, particularly as women, we tend to take care of everybody else, but we don't take care of ourselves. But if we don't take care of ourselves first, then we're not going to be effective in caring for others. So it's really important for us to develop a personal self-care plan, and realizing that every person is different. And so what may work for me may not work for you. You might want nice bubble bath or whatever, and I might want to go to get a massage, or go watch a funny movie. So you have to figure out the kinds of things that are going to make sense for you. And then, listen to your favorite music. And so you can, what, I suggest is you can develop a playlist of uplifting songs, so that when you're feeling down or whatever, then you can play that, and you can just be encouraged by those things. Read and watch movies that make you laugh, or that have positive look on life, because there's so much negative that we see normally on every day. We need some things. If we are already dealing with trauma, then we need to deal with some things that have a more positive outlook. And then journaling is another way to deal with that. And so I do have a journal that I developed called My Experience Embracing Diversity. And I put it from a positive standpoint, but not all of those experiences are positive. But we have to figure out how to make lemonade from lemons sometimes. And so by
I like
by
that.
write by writing down our experiences, it helps us to process it, and it gets it out, opposed to us just stuffing down those feelings. And it can give us a better perspective on things. And I think that that's really, really important. And then there's a lot of helpful apps that you can do. Um, that have been actually developed for people of color, which is cool. So like Shine, it's meditations for people of color. Then there's Liberation and Gathering Place. And so I would find using those apps can be another way that you deal with it. Um, as I said, if you are involved in a church group or whatever, you could go to maybe counseling with your pastor or whoever. But sometimes that's not enough. I'm a Christian and I'm a minister,
Yeah.
but that is, I can tell you that some of the problems that result as a result of this racial trauma, you need professional help.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so don't be afraid to go seek professional help, and then do your research before you take somebody. Try to find out about them. See if there's a match between their services and how they present. And then if you get in there and after a couple of sessions you don't feel that connection, don't just say, I'm not doing this anymore. The counseling is terrible. Just say, this person may not have been the right person for me. Let me look and see if I can find someone else that's a better fit. And I think those are um, really some important things to remember.
Like, really like that. I think there's things that you can do for yourself, and you've come up with, a real sort of menu of things that you can do to help yourself, which in it's really important, I guess, not to be too hard on yourself as well.
Right.
And
Hmm.
and I also think, and I wanted to add that there's also, as well as looking after yourself, getting the support that you need and taking care of yourself, there's also some responsibility on education, on the structural
Hmm.
things as well. And I think it's important to remember that as well, and not to take it all on yourself. There's
That's right.
definitely a thing to look after yourself and be
Hmm.
as resilient as you can be, but there's also a role for education, the police, government. Do you think so, Dr. Roberta?
Oh, absolutely. Because racism is systemic. It's
Mhm.
in, I mean, you can't escape it. You really just can't escape it. And so realizing that those systems need to begin looking at, now there's a lot of, with all the Black Lives Matter movement and all that, now everyone's want to say, oh, I'm an ally in this and that. What does that mean? Some people are just doing it, what I say, performative allyship, and that's not worth anything.
Yeah.
We don't want you just to put a sign in your yard or to put something on your door if you don't have a real commitment to doing the work. And I found that even as a consultant, and our dear coach Rosetta, she would say, who is your ideal, client? And one of the things that I found is that my ideal client are people who are serious about doing this diversity work. Don't call me in to do a training just because you want to check off a box,
Yeah.
but call me when you really want to help your staff or faculty uh, grow and to develop a real team that are with equity and justice minded people. That's who I
Yeah.
want to work with. I want to work
Yeah.
with people who want to be real. And so that's it's about being real, and it's about being authentic, you
Yes,
know.
definitely. It's
Hmm.
definitely
And I
about
did
being
want to go back
authentic.
because when we were talking about types, I left off one that's really, really important that sometimes people overlook,
Hmm.
and that's intergenerational or historical trauma.
Uh-huh.
And this is trauma that is passed on from one generation to the next generation, and something that's called medically called epigenetics, where it is passed on through the genes. Trauma is
Mhm.
passed on in the genes. And so think about it, from slavery on, those were some traumatic things that happened. And so when you look at, in particularly in the United States or whatever, why the divorce rate between African Americans is so high, or they don't get married, Black women don't get married. Why? That's something passed on from slavery, because the Black woman was taught that she could not rely on the man to take care of them because they were stripped away, they were beaten, all of those kinds of things. And so it has now been translated to things like, I don't need no man. I can do bad by myself. Those are things that you hear from African American women. But where does that come from? That comes from a long-standing history of trauma based on slavery and things that have happened to African American people that has been passed on through our genes. And so now we have a different response to certain things.
Yeah. That's a lot to think about, isn't it?
It
And
is.
I think I can see the truth in all of that. And I think the challenge is how to live positively and authentically, knowing that all of that history has an impact on the now, doesn't it? And how can you
Yes.
go forward? And I think one of the challenges for us as Black women is that how do we stop the cycle, I guess, around how
Exactly.
do we make that not the legacy for our own children? Have you any thoughts
Right.
about that?
Yeah. I think it's really important. I think number one, start teaching early,
Mhm.
teaching about these things. And you talked about education. And so one of the things that I love to do is, so I've got three grandsons. And so this is another, they're my why,
Yeah,
because I've got three male children. One is one, the other one
that's
is
cute.
7, and the other one is 17.
Hmm.
And the one who's 17, of course, I'm the most concerned about because he loves wearing his hoodies. He's driving now and all of those things. And he lives in Mississippi. And I'm like, oh my God,
Hmm.
it's just a scary thing because supposing he's in the wrong neighborhood, supposing something happens and he stops, and all of those things that you worry about. So you have to constantly talk to our young people about what's happening, but it shouldn't just start early. But you don't also want to um, discourage them from living
No,
life.
it's a
And
very
so, like,
delicate balance,
I
isn't
know.
it?
So my 7 year old, I always call him my mini me because he is definitely a social justice advocate. His favorite person besides Spider-Man is Martin Luther King,
Oh wow.
So it was really interesting because I mean this kid he loves Spider-Man. I mean and he's got like 50 man Spider-Man costumes and he just dressed up like Spider-Man for no reason except he's Spider-Man. But in school they asked them to it was character day. They had to dress up as something. And he chose everyone thought he was going to do Spider-Man. He wanted to be Martin Luther King.
It's amazing.
And so we were, when the pandemic was happening and he was doing more working, at school at home, he had some more time. Then I would, on a weekly basis, we would have our Black Studies time. And we would
Oh
talk
wow,
about,
that's
we would
amazing.
have that. And we would just talk about things and I would share things. And he and I have just was talking last week and he was like, I missed that and I want to do that again. So we're going
Yeah,
ready to start back. But it's hard trying to figure out his schedule with now that he's back in school and he's a big first grader, so he's got a lot of homework.
yeah. You've got
you
stuff to
know.
do.
Yeah,
It's
so we're going
important
to
to
try.
make time for those kind of things, and it's lovely that you've got that relationship with your grandson as
Hmm.
well. You had a couple of book recommendations. I think you've written chapters of books as well, haven't you? Tell us about
Yes, I
that.
do. Okay, so there are a couple of books that I think that I've have chapters in, and all of them is about your impact. And regardless of what you've been through, that you can make a difference. Even if it's just something as simple as sharing your story, talking to someone, getting to meet someone. So I have one book. It's called, I know it's hard to with these backgrounds sometimes. So let me see if I can hold it right. There we go. Make It Matter:
Mhm.
How to Create a Life of Unforgettable Impact and Abundant Fulfillment. And so I
Okay.
have a chapter in here, and this is a great book because I actually kind of tell my story about what happened, my experience, and it's called "Make Your Inclusion Matter." So that's the chapter that I did
Lovely.
in here. And then also I have this book called, I have a chapter in called that I did with Les Brown. I'm so excited about that one. That
Oh
was just so
wow.
cool. Yes. Unleash Your Undeniable Impact. And this is really nice because it's a compilation of messages to inspire you. I mean, and they're just short, really nice, inspiring things. And so on this one, I was talking about how to have a life well spent.
Lovely. How
You know,
lovely.
and so I have those, and then as I said, my journal talking about exploring, embracing diversity. But then this is one for people who are dealing with racial trauma that I would really recommend. It's called Healing Racial Trauma: The Road to Resilience by Sheila Weiss Rowe. And I think that is a great book for people who are dealing with trauma or wondering if they, have trauma, what that's like. And it goes through a lot. And I think that would be very, very helpful for people.
Thank you for those book recommendations, and I will put links to those books, all of those books in the show notes. So do you, it'd be really, do you have some way that people can work with you? Do you have a current sort of gift or promotion that you're doing that you can share with the audience?
Oh, I do. I do have a nice little gift that I would love to give to people, and it's tips
Mhm.
to ease the stress of racial trauma. So self-care tips to ease the stress of racial trauma. And so that's something that I would love to share with them. And then, as I said, I do cultural coaching and a variety of different offer classes and things. And I would definitely encourage and enjoy working with people. And I would love to have some people to work with across the pond. I
Oh,
really would.
let's make that happen.
All right.
So thank you for sharing that with. And again, I'll put the link in the show notes, both on YouTube and on the podcast as well. So,
Yes, and I guess what? I have a new podcast coming out.
oh wow, tell us about that.
So on May 21st, I will be launching my podcast called, and it's based on a Facebook group that started with a Facebook group. It's called My Couple Culture and a Taste of Diversity.
Oh, I love that.
And so I am just really excited about it and have been working on it for quite a while. So look for that
I
as
will
well.
do. I'm really looking forward to that. I love the title as well. That sounds absolutely wonderful. Now we're coming to the part of the show, which is where I sort of like turn the focus on you, I guess, and I ask all of my guests, both ask them two questions. How do you stay focused, positive, and productive? And you're a busy woman. You are, you are a professor, a doctor. You work. You've got grandchildren. You've got your consultancy business. You're going to have a podcast. So how do you keep
Mhm.
it all together and stay
Who
focused?
says I do?
Positive and productive. I know you do. I know you do. And then the second question is that, and it's really in sort of like reflecting back actually on all the things we've spoken about, and how do you maintain your own health and well-being, because it can get a bit much, can it, particularly when you're spinning a lot of plates. You've got family all over the country. I know your family don't necessarily live near you.
Right.
How do you keep it all together?
Oh, it's hard, and I have to say, it really is hard, and I have learned and grown over the years. So one of the things that I think is really important, um, is learning to say no, and that you don't have to do everything.
Yeah.
Everything is not for you to do, and so realizing that, and setting appropriate boundaries. Because people will drain you dry if you let them.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to set up appropriate boundaries and say, this during this time is I'm going to do this. And then make sure and you need to make yourself a priority. And
Love
so,
that.
a lot of times we have our to-do list and we're not on the to-do list.
Yeah.
So we need to be on the to-do list. We need to pencil in time for ourselves. And one thing, I was talking to someone the other day and I was like, you need time to think, innovate, create. And then that leads to success. If you don't have time to think, innovate, and create, then you're just spinning your wheels, because you need to take time to pull away. I mean, because I know, so I'm in a top level administrative position,
Mm.
and I'm in lots and lots of meetings.
Yeah.
And when I come out of those meetings, there's the lot everybody has a to-do list on those from those meetings.
Absolutely.
But I have to build in time for me to even think and process what I've been through, and what's demanded of me, opposed to just running like like we say, like a chicken without a head, kind of thing. But so that's important. It's important to take time for yourself. It's important to do things that are life-giving and things that bring you joy.
I love that.
and try to avoid things that are life draining and stressful, and avoid toxic people as much as possible.
I would agree with that. I like that. I like
Yeah,
those. I like those tips. And does that work for you?
it does most of the time, but sometimes, you have to call on other people. And so sometimes, when you're feeling down and out, who do you call?
Yeah.
You have to figure out, I have my husband, which is great, but I also have my daughter and Angel. Angel
Yeah.
is that saying?
I know, Angel.
Angel is, she's my angel for real.
Hmm.
In that, when I'm going through or when she's going through, we just got that vibe going, and so we can really uplift and support each other. And then there are other women in my lives like you who I can talk to and share, and that's really helping. That's why I said it's important to build that support system, and maintaining your health. If you need to do things like go to the doctor, listen to what the doctor is telling you to do.
Yeah.
And then what's really important, what I've been learning recently a lot of, listen to your body. Your
Yeah.
body tells you things. And so, I've gone through some serious surgeries and stuff recently. And so when I'm feeling tired, I know I have to lie down. And I just have to listen to my body. And so my husband is a big TV watcher, and he really wants me to watch TV with him all the time. And there's sometimes that I said, I just have to lay down and I
Mm.
don't want to sit up and watch TV. I mean, and you said, we've got a TV in the bedroom. You can go upstairs while I'm laying down and watch TV if you want to be with me. But I have to lay down. But, really understanding and listening to what your body needs, because it tells you a lot of that. And then that is a way also for you to minimize your stress and deal with some of the traumatic things that you've been through, is just to take some time and give your body and mind time to heal.
Brilliant. I love that. Thank you so much for
Hmm.
that. And how do people stay in touch with you? How do people find out about your work? And
Well,
where can they
I
connect with you?
you can connect with me. I am on Instagram, and at Instagram at Wilburn Associates LLC,
Mhm.
and I'm also on Facebook, and I'm on LinkedIn under my name. You can check my name, and I'm on Twitter as well. So I'm on all the social medias, and then um, I have a website. My website is wilburnassociates.org.
Brilliant.
And so I'm sure you'll have it in the show notes, and they
I
can
will
contact
have
me.
it in the show notes. Thank you so much, Dr. Wilburn, Roberta, my friend Roberta. It's been a
Yes.
fantastic conversation, and thank you for your wisdom, thank you for your tips, and thank you for all that you've shared. Do you have a final tip, an actionable thing that the audience can take away from this conversation?
Remember that don't that self trauma, that racial trauma is real. Okay.
Yeah.
And when you are feeling traumatized, or feeling like something has happened to you, don't ignore it.
Mhm.
Get help, reach out. And if you
Fantastic.
contact me, I'll give you the tips that you can use to help deal with that kind of stressful experience.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Roberta. It's been wonderful to have you here. That's it for the Dawn Jarvis Show today. If you've liked what you've heard and seen, like, share, subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.